If you do not want camera on or sound on, then I guess this will be recorded and posted on the city's YouTube channel. All right.
Thanks, Katie. Hi, everyone. Good to see many of you here today. I hope you're all staying safe and cool during this heat wave. Katie, can you go ahead and call the roll?
Yes, Karina Bowler.
Here.
Bruce Brunner.
Here.
Joey Dobson.
Here.
Colleen Ebinger.
Here.
Chloe Jackson.
Chloe's here.
Yes, I'm here. I've been trying to find out how to unmute myself, y'all, but I'm here.
Okay, hi, Chloe. Spilinsky J. Cox. Queen Kimmons.
Present.
Oh, Charlotte Kinsley.
Here.
Liliana Latron Garcia.
Here.
Brenda Marcos. David McGee.
Here.
Lisa Mears.
Here.
Melissa Newman. Colleen O'Connor-Toberman. Colleen said she would be absent today. Maggie Oddie.
Here.
Scott Schaefer. Janine Seja.
Here.
Cecil Smith.
Here.
Rose Tang.
Here.
Annie Wells.
Here.
Let me just go back to see if I missed anyone. Spilinsky J. Cox. Melissa Newman. Scott Schaefer. All right, there are 15 members present, so we have a quorum.
All right. Thanks, Katie. Colleen, did you want to go ahead or would you rather me handle these preliminary items?
If why don't you go ahead since you're already doing it? I ultimately ended up not being able to join as I was expecting. Thanks, Joey.
Yeah, no problem at all. So at this point, we're ready for a motion to adopt today's agenda. Does anyone care to move today's agenda for approval?
Lisa Mears, so moved.
Thank you,
Bruce,
Lisa.
second.
Thank you, Bruce. Great, Katie.
All right, on the motion to adopt the agenda, Karina Bowler.
Yes.
Bruce Brunner.
Yes.
Joey Dobson.
Yes.
Colleen Ebinger.
Yes.
Chloe Jackson.
Yes.
Queen Kimmons.
Yes.
Charlotte Kinsley.
Yes.
Liliana Latron Garcia.
Yes.
Brenda Marcos. David McGee.
Yes.
Lisa Mears.
Yes.
Melissa Newman. Maggie Oddie.
Yes.
Scott Schaefer. Janine Seja.
Yes.
Cecil Smith.
Yes.
Rose Tang.
Yes.
Annie Wells.
Yes.
All right, there are 15 yeses.
All right, so that motion carries and we have adopted our agenda. Is there a motion to accept or approve the minutes from our last month's meeting? Those are linked in the agenda.
So moved.
Is that Queen?
Correct.
Thanks, Queen. Any seconds?
Second, this is Colleen Ebinger.
Thanks.
All right, so on the motion to adopt the minutes, Karina Bowler.
Yes.
Bruce Brunner.
Yes.
Joey Dobson,
Yes.
Colleen Ebbinger,
Yes.
Chloe Jackson,
Yes.
Queen Kimmons,
Yes.
Charlotte Kinsley,
Yes.
Liliana Latron Garcia,
Yes.
David McGee,
Yes.
Lisa Mears,
Yes.
Maggie Oddie,
Yes.
Janine Sija,
Yes.
Cecil Smith,
Yes.
Rose Tang,
Yes.
Annie Wells.
Yes.
All right, there are 15 yeses, so that's adopted or accepted. The minutes are accepted.
Great. Thanks, Katie. Thanks, everyone, as always, for your patience with our procedural votes that we have to take. At this point, we've reached the point on our agenda for our public comment period. We set aside 10 minutes for at each meeting for public comment related to housing issues in Minneapolis. We'll take notes and follow up as needed. If anyone is here today by phone to make a public comment, please unmute yourself now and pressing *6 and let us know your name, and then we'll call on individuals to make their comment. And we do ask that comments be limited to 1 minute each. So is anyone here to make a comment? Again, you'll need to unmute yourself by pressing *6. All right, one more time, if anyone is here to make a public comment for our committee, this is your time to talk. You can unmute yourself by pressing *6 and let us know your name. Okay, I am not hearing anyone here to make a public comment, so I'll close the public comment period for our agenda. I think now we're going to move through some updates on what the city has in the works with regard to housing, things we've talked about before that we want to make sure we give updates on. Katie, are you going to start this one off?
Yes, I will start it off. So at last month's meeting, we discussed the pre-eviction filing notice ordinance or fair notice ordinance. That was adopted by the city council and signed by the mayor since our last meeting and is now in effect in the city of Minneapolis. So under the ordinance, property owner who is before filing an eviction for non-payment of rent, they must provide a 14-day notice to their renter to make them aware that they will be filing an eviction if the arrears are not paid within that time, and to also provide information about where to seek legal advice and emergency assistance. So that is in effect now. As we'll get to in a moment, the eviction moratorium is still in effect in Minnesota, but that is the city policy now. City ordinance is requiring a pre-eviction filing notice before filing a formal notice. Regulatory Services is going to be leading the implementation efforts around that. And so, Kelly, I don't know if you have anything to add, but I think the main update is that we discussed that, had a presentation about it at our meeting in May, and since then it has been adopted by the city council and signed by the mayor. So, Kelly, if you have anything to add, or I don't know if anybody has any questions on that in particular.
I don't have anything to add, Katie. We're still working on some implementation details, but it is.
Kelly, we lost your audio. It doesn't
Hello?
say you're muted. There we go. That I can hear
I know.
you.
No, my internet is going in and out, and so is my sound. Sorry. I can join from another device, but basically we're working on it and we're ready to go. if we get a complaint.
All right. So then the next item is emergency rental assistance. I have a brief update, and then I don't know if anybody else has any others. Rent Help MN is the statewide emergency rental assistance that is available for renters currently, and Minneapolis is partnering as part of that program. We have our processors who are processing applications that are created by renters on their own behalf through the Rent Help MN system. I know last time we spent a lot of time talking about that and about some concerns about it. I know that our processors and our partners are finding that some of the issues are being worked out. We have been able to start issuing some payments through that system. Liliana is one of the partners. I don't want to call you out, but she is one of the Clues is one of the partners. So, and I know others on this call are closely working on the program. So I'd welcome updates from others as well. But so we're continuing to work on providing rental assistance through Rent Help MN. But one update I wanted to share in addition to that is that some of the metro area jurisdictions, Hennepin, Ramsey, Dakota counties, and the cities of Minneapolis and St. Paul, also just this week launched a program that's intended to be complementary to Rent Help MN. It's a program, it's called the Zero Balance Project. And it is for property owners and managers to apply on behalf of their renters. So it's not a program that renters can apply to or to start the application process on their own. And really the rationale behind it is that we know that last time with some of the CHAP and other emergency assistance programs, there were renters who, for whatever reason, didn't start an application on their own, couldn't get through the process or start an application on their own, and that the best way to reach some of those renters was for their property owners to apply on their behalf. So we did launch this program. Sorry, I'm going to mute this.
Yeah, Katie, can you mute? There's a lot of feedback.
Yeah, and I'm not going to mute everyone at once because we learned that when we do that, it oops, I think I just muted Karina accidentally. Karina, you may be muted, so you may have to press *6. If we mute everyone at once, Apple users are locked out for the rest of the meeting. So we are I'm not going to mute everyone, but I'll try to mute the lines that are making noise. So anyway, so the Zero Balance Project is this. It's a program just for Hennepin, Ramsey, Dakota counties for property owners to apply on behalf of their renters. We are working with the state and Rent Help MN to be clear on, sort of the differences between the programs, and that if you've already in that process, stick with it. But this is another, if for people who haven't been able to apply for whatever reason, or are, need more support, that this is another option. It is at this point time limited. It's only open through June 20th. If there is still funding available at that point, it may be extended. But the funding is limited because it's just these local jurisdictions. So that's one update I wanted to share. And I don't know if anyone else has anything they want to share related to emergency rental assistance today. Go ahead, Cecil. Well, I guess I'm not moderating, Joey is, but I'm calling on you.
That's okay. I'll call on you, Cecil. Go ahead.
Thank you. Just a report on the outside of things, the owner, operator, manager side. Still lots of delays with Rent Help MN. It's very slow. Owners are getting 1 or 2 checks out of the dozens of applications that they've submitted. Things still keep getting squirrely, looking approved, and then going back, looking like it's going back, but we've been told it's actually still going forward. They just don't have a way of recognizing when they're re-looking at a case. However, in a major contrast, Zero Balance opened on Monday. I think they've had over 700 applications already. I know of applications that went in on Monday and Tuesday and are already approved for payment, which means the renter did cooperate because they have to submit proof of income, evidence of income, loss of income, however. But basically, as soon as the renter is able to upload that information, in a matter of hours, it's approved. So congratulations to Zero Balance, because you pulled the whole program together in about 6 weeks, and it's working like a dream. We just wish it would happen at Rent Help MN. And hopefully, lessons are learned that can help the Minnesota Housing figure out how to get it done, because clearly it can be done. It's such a contrast. It's night and day. So just wanted to add that. So kudos to Zero Balance. I will be asking that more funds be transferred, even from the state agency, to a functional program, because the other one's not working. But that's another conversation down the road. But I'm certainly going to start advocating, because other states have been able to transfer money that they receive from the federal government to counties, and I don't see what any obstruction or objection could be if Zero Balance is working and folks are getting their checks. And I will add, Zero Balance is paying out 3 months rent in advance, as well as the back rent. So thank you to Katie, because I know you helped on the city side to get that going. Thanks to all the folks at Hennepin County, Ramsey, Dakota County. It's just awesome.
Thanks, Cecil. Yeah, Liliana, go ahead.
Yes, I have a question for Cecil and for Katie, actually. So if right now from Minnesota Rent, they transfer 40 clients, a Spanish speaker, to Clues. And, we're gathering the documents to start paying up. If we have some issues with the system itself, is it possible that we can work with the landlord and with the tenant to transfer the file to the other system? Or do you think that will be just too confusing?
Liliana, I think our guidance at this point would be to not do that, because it's already started in one system, and the systems don't really talk to each other. We're working on a process for ensuring that we're not duplicating payments in partnership with the state, but at this point, that's not how we're planning to move forward with that.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
So this is Colleen. I just wanted just to kind of chime in. Cecil, thanks for that feedback. It's helpful to hear that it's working. I have to say, I think all of us were feeling on Monday morning quite a sense of trepidation, wondering what was going to happen. But so far, it does seem to be moving smoothly. So just for anyone who is, if you're talking with people who are looking for assistance, again, this, just to be clear, it does have to be the landlord who initiates the application, but then it goes to the tenant to submit their own information and documentation. And then currently we have 35 processors from CLA, from Clinton Larson Allen, so an accounting firm, who are helping on the administrative side. And they're kind of, on deck to just quickly start going through those, and they will follow up with people if there's additional information that's needed. And then we are approving them as quickly as we can get final, a second review from that administrative team. So we are trying to make it go quickly and smoothly. But again, just it is important that it's clear that for this particular program, it has to be the landlord who initiates it, and then it does have to be, again, with the cooperation of the tenants to submit their information as well.
Thanks, Colleen. That's, I think, really helpful. I have a couple questions, one related to the rent help program and one related to zero balance. And maybe this is for Katie for the rent help program. So I've been hearing that folks are starting to get official denial letters for their rent help amend applications, and often for reasons like, they didn't get the documentation they needed from the landlord. I heard, though, for the Minneapolis tenants that those denials are somehow being kind of filtered through the city, and the city's following up on them. Do you know more about that, or can you share more about what's happening if a Minneapolis renter is gets officially denied from rent help?
So I know we've had a few denials, and so it's a little bit tricky because there's Minneapolis has a pot of funds in the rent help system, and so does the state, and Minneapolis residents are being served by both. So, and we have different so the state has its processor, and then we have several processors who we are working with. And so I may have to follow up to give you the exact specifics about how it's working. I know we had our first few denials, and then we were, I think, following up on a few of those to see if we could, get some of the corrected information back. So we do have an appeals process. And Liliana, I keep calling on you, but Clues is one of our processors, so they're very in the weeds on this, more so than I am. And so Liliana, if you have more detail you could share, at least from Clues' perspective, about how that process is working, I would welcome that.
Absolutely. Right now, from our perspective, we are not denying any file unless it's income. Like if they're making money, they really don't need it. That's the sense. That's the only thing we're denying. If we are missing documents or it's hard to get a hold of the client, we are not following the 3 attempts and then we close the file. It's actually 2 weeks. It has to be an email if we have an email address, a phone call, we mail a letter. Like we are exhausting all the ways for us to get a hold of the client and the participant that is in need. So we're not denying absolutely anybody because they forgot to submit one pay stubs. We are working with the client to say, okay, do you need me to reach out to your temp agency? Let's go do a conference call. Are you having issues with your landlord? Let's go do a 3-way calling. So we are making sure that we are as flexible as possible. There's some folks that lost their jobs. Now they're going back into the workforce, and their shifts look different. Sometimes they're working in the morning, sometimes they're working at night. So we're being mindful in adjusting to the participant needs, which is just needed right now. So that's, I think, most of the agencies that are partnering with Katie or with the city of Minneapolis. That's the way we're approaching or how we're serving our community.
That's really great to hear, because I don't think that's the case statewide in every place. So thank you so much for doing that work. I mean, it's related. It's important to, first and foremost, get folks the money they need. But as I'm sure we'll discuss with the moratorium, it's important, kind of the status of the application might become really important for the moratorium, whether it's open or closed. My other question was for the zero balance project. What are the sort of agreements that the landlord needs to make kind of as a condition for receiving funds?
Yes, that's a good question, Joy. Let me pull those up. It might just take me a moment here, but there are some conditions. Apologies.
Katie, do you want me to chime in?
Yes, go ahead, Colleen. Colleen is also Family Housing Fund's a partner on this as well, which is why Colleen is helping out here too. Yeah, go ahead, and then if there's any you miss, I can add to it.
Yeah, so the commitment is that so landlords have to commit that or attest that, number one, they will not evict a tenant for the period for which they've received payment, and that the balance is fully paid, meaning any late fees, anything, that there's nothing in addition that they will come back and say this amount is due, so it's paid in full. And then for Hennepin, for Hennepin and Ramsey counties and the cities of Minneapolis and St. Paul, the landlord also has to attest that they will not evict for a period of at least 60 days after the end of the assistance that's provided. Dakota County is the exception in that attestation is not a requirement, but for those other 4 jurisdictions, well, Minneapolis, St. Paul, Ramsey, and Hennepin counties, there's no ability to evict for 60 days after the end of the assistance that's provided.
And then the other one,
and then it's and then just kind of basic things like they're attesting that yes, this rent is due to them, and they're the owner of the building, and things like that. So the landlord has to provide documentation showing, like, property taxes showing they own the building, W-9, and things like that. But from a tenant protection perspective, those are, I think, the primary ones. Is there anything I've missed, Katie?
Yeah, the only other one I would add is that they're agreeing to refrain from reporting late payments to credit bureaus for the months, for the household for the months that they're awarded assistance.
Yep, that's right. Yep, I did miss that one. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you so much. That's really helpful. Do others have questions about rent assistance, either the statewide, Minneapolis's participation in the statewide rent help amend program or the new zero balance project?
This is Karina. I have a question.
Go ahead.
Hey, do we know if there's an extension that's going to be added by legislation?
Karina, are you talking about the eviction moratorium?
Yes.
That is a great segue because that's the next update. And I'm probably not the closest to this, but I'll share what I know and then would welcome others to share what they know. So the statewide eviction moratorium is still in effect through June 14th currently. I believe it's the 14th. And so there are negotiations happening at the legislature right now as part of the statewide budget negotiations. There are negotiations around an off-ramp for the eviction moratorium. Mostly what I know is from reading articles in the newspaper this week. So it's that, that's one of the sticking points still in the negotiations. The latest thing I read is that there was some discussion of including a preemption for rent control at the local level as part of a negotiation, and that was dropped yesterday, as at least what was reported in, I think, Minnesota Reformer. But beyond that, I think there's still negotiation happening about what the length of time for an off-ramp should be. And so I know that there are people on this call who are pretty close, following that pretty closely. So if any committee members have more updates, feel free to add those.
Thanks, Katie. Yeah, I'll just add, for the immediate side, Governor Walz did indicate that he is planning to extend the emergency powers for another month or another period of 30 days. The legislature will be meeting in special session starting next week, and where they would have the opportunity to shut down that extension, but that's not something they have done yet. So the governor is planning to extend the emergency powers, and I think it's fair to say that it's likely that the legislature would vote to approve that. So I think, as Katie said, as negotiations are ongoing, I think the status quo will remain until there is unless and until there is a compromise that comes out of the legislature. And I agree. I think they're continuing to talk now. There was a press conference held by some of the DFL members of the negotiation side yesterday. My sense is that some of the sticking points are around a pre-filing notice, similar to what the city just passed, but a statewide pre-filing notice requirement in the off-ramp, and some questions around which cases that are filed perhaps in violation of the off-ramp should be expunged. I know those are some of the issues that are still kind of being debated about right now, but the legislature will be back in session next week. your guess is as good as mine. What are we going to be able to reach a compromise on, and what are we not? We'll see, but they'll be working as part of everything they need to get done with the budget and everything. I mean, this is one of the, I think, 2 or 3 things that really is left of the governor's emergency powers. It's this and some kind of emergency like vaccine, powers to coordinate vaccines, and then some issues around SNAP, around food assistance is my understanding. So this is one of the final things to kind of get that the governor's office wants to get figured out legislatively before completely relinquishing the emergency powers. That's my understanding. If others have questions or other context you want to add, I know it's been a long time of we don't know yet and we'll see, but that's where we're at.
Good to know. Thank you.
Absolutely. Anything else from committee members on eviction moratorium? All right. Thanks everyone for those updates. And then I think at this point we were going to just kind of open up the floor to see if people had other agenda items that they had in mind for the upcoming meetings, especially for the next few months. I know a few things on our radar. We're going to be talking later today about the budget in the city's budget in the context of the special funds from the American Rescue Plan Act. So one of the things that we'll be continuing to address in the coming months is the city's budget, both in that context and then in sort of the normal budgeting process. The mayor's budget proposal will come out late summer. And so that's for sure something that our committee will continue to keep an eye on. And I think it's something that if people have ideas for how we want to really dig into the budget, if there are people who are particularly interested, who want to take on the task of sort of digging in as we learn more about the mayor's proposals and as it works through the process to kind of be local committee experts on the budget with regard to housing issues, I think that would be great. So anyway, that's one thing we'll absolutely be tracking, and certainly any other policy items that come through related to housing to the council will be tracking. But are there other things that the committee members are feeling like we're missing or we haven't talked about in a while, or that we need to, that are timely? It's kind of an open floor.
Yes, this is Queen. I wanted to bring something up real quick, and then I got to go to this training. I'm going to hop off. I have wrote a bill. My bill in the House is HF 1416, and in the Senate, my bill is SF 1488. This particular bill addresses the conversations that I've had with MHFA, where people can use contract for deed to be first also applied for first-time home buyers. So it puts more people, to me, that can afford to do a contract for deed into some housing. I think it's kind of overlooked a lot that individuals, during tax time or whenever they have extra money, what have you, they are able to purchase a car, but aren't able to purchase a home or, a place to stay. So I think that this bill will, just a little bit about the bill. It definitely speaks to doing some credit repair and all that stuff, but it's more so about getting individuals into some housing model. That is the gist of that. That's what I'm pushing forward. I think that will help alleviate some of the crisis of people in some housing. And that's my 2 bills. That's my 1 bill in the House and the Senate. Thank you.
Hey, Queen, I'm sorry. Queen, can you tell me your bill number again?
Yes, in the House, the bill number is HF 1416, and I've already had a hearing on that, and we had great reviews, but somehow the chair, Alice Houseman, has not put it in the ombudsman. I heard that they want to do some of this American Recovery Plan money and try to do something with it at that point with that. So I'll be looking forward to see what comes about that. In the Senate, it is SF 1488. And I did get a chance to talk to the chair, Senator Richard Draham, who said he would give me a hearing on it, but I didn't get a hearing yet. But my bill in the Senate is authored and introduced by Omar Fatah, and in the House it is by Huden Hassan. So
Okay.
as you all
Yeah,
keep an eye out on that.
yeah, I will. I'm connected in there too, so I'll make sure I look out for it when I talk to my representatives.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks, Queen, for your work on that and for sharing that. I'm wondering if it might be an interesting or helpful conversation later, a little bit later in the calendar year, as we're heading into the next legislative session statewide, to advise the city as they are comprising their, like working with their intergovernmental affairs folks to comprise the city's legislative agenda. Since, you know, we're of course a city advising the city in our role, but I think it would be appropriate for us as a committee to advise the city what we think they and their IGR folks, their lobbyist folks should be advocating for housing at the state level for what impacts Minneapolis. So that could be a conversation we have around the city's legislative priorities later. That's a good idea.
Thank you.
Others?
Yeah, I just put one in the chat. I've been reading recently about some of the reparations programs that are getting going in other cities in the US, like Evanston, Illinois, around historical impact of racial discrimination on housing. And I don't know how that ties into an agenda item per se, so it's a little loose idea, but I think the topic is something that I'd love to get their arms around or to be thinking about. And also, different idea, I think that the housing affordability crisis, you know, loose, like little c, stemming from what's happening in the real estate market, and as well as like construction costs and barriers to construction. I think that's something that's going to have really big impact in the next several years. And I don't know if there's also a way to kind of get this committee onto that topic somehow. That's it.
Great, thanks, and thanks for alerting me to the comments coming in on the chat too. Those are two really good ideas, and I know on the first one we had talked a little bit about one thing that I don't think we've really addressed in this committee is housing discrimination from the perspective of like the city's Department of Civil Rights. We've talked about historically the disparate rates of homeownership and things like that, but we have a new interim director of the Department of Civil Rights at the city, Amani Jafar, and so that could be, you know, the idea around reparations related to housing discrimination. I think that's been something that we haven't addressed yet. I agree. And absolutely with the affordability. And I'll also just lift up that Lisa Mears put in the chat that if there's interest, Lisa would be happy to do a short presentation on the state of youth homelessness in Minneapolis and could invite peer nonprofits. So just noting, Lisa, that I got that great idea down too. Thanks.
Thank you.
This is Charlotte Kinsley. Following up on Lisa, if you wanted to, if people were interested in this, I'd be happy to talk through to Minneapolis Public Schools and sort of our process for identifying and who does and does not qualify for housing support through our current system. So if people had an interest in that, we'd be happy to partner to add that part to the conversation as well.
Great. Yeah, I think that'd be helpful. Go ahead.
Do we
Bruce, sorry.
still do we still have a member from MPHA on this committee, or did he drop off?
Yes, thanks for raising that, Bruce. I was realizing at the beginning I should have shared. Jeff is no longer on the committee, and so we will be getting a new member from MPHA at some point. I have been in touch with them about that, but they are we're trying to figure out who the right fit is. So right now we do not. That seat is currently vacant on the committee, but it will be filled again at some point, hopefully in the next few months.
I'll just bring up, and I'm going to piggyback on something Charlotte mentioned about homelessness with schools, and that is in the Stable Homes program, HUD, or I guess for our area, MPHA's reimbursement rates, they choose to reimburse at 100% of market rate for 1 and 2 bedroom properties, but they only reimburse at 95% for 3 and 4 bedroom properties, which is an issue getting enough apartments or places for the Stable Homes program. It's something I participate in, but it makes it difficult because I offer 3 and 4 bedroom units, but it takes off another $100 a month on top of what I have to kind of give up. So that's something I'm interested in hearing, if that's something MPHA can adjust, because I know that would help Charlotte's sphere of having more landlords willing to put units into the program. And I know they're looking to double the number of families that they bring out of homelessness. So just as a heads up.
And just to add to that a little bit, is that the region's also receiving a number of new vouchers as part of the ARP money. Sorry if I'm repeating something that was already said, but there's going to be additional vouchers coming in for people experiencing homelessness that MPHA will be working with the county to identify more properties for. Those are more focused. I think they can be for single adults or families. So,
yeah. We just know that the family portion is the most difficult and has the least amount of units out in the market.
Thanks, Bruce.
This is Karina. I want to chime in.
Yeah, go ahead.
So I want to talk about the HR 40 for reparations. So I know there is an article that was in Chicago where they're protecting Black communities and Black home ownership, like in protecting those homes. Like maybe if like Rosa Parks lived in it, you know, they're protecting those spaces. I know in the beginning we were talking about when the Drake caught on fire, and it was said that that space was never protected because it was meant to protect, you know, Black people when they come in for protection. It was never put in the Green Book. So adding their reparations to protect housing, we want to make sure that we can also protect 38th in Chicago all the way down to King Park, because all of that area is Black owned. So we want to make sure that we can focus on HR 40 for reparations for better housing and stop the redlining. Another thing is mentioned, you just said that they're going to be doing vouchers again for, is that going to be for Section 8? And then if that is there any update on the lawsuit that's blocking landlords for accepting Section 8 for renters?
As Joey mentioned, we are potentially going to invite the city's Office of Civil Rights to an upcoming meeting, so they could certainly talk a little bit more about that. But on my understanding on the lawsuit, and I have not received an update in several months, so I can get more current update and bring it to the next meeting. But while the state Supreme Court did rule in the city's favor on part of the lawsuit, there were still other pieces of it that were sent back to lower courts to be worked out. And so the lawsuit is, or the ordinance is still not being enforced at this time while those other pieces work their way through the courts.
Okay. And then, yes, I mentioned too at our last meeting that we definitely need civil rights and the NAACP and those who come to these meetings or sit on this committee. so that this housing crisis can be protected and those answers can be, you know, answered through the right channels as well. So I would love and can't wait to have them at these meetings.
Great. Thanks, everyone. That's a lot of really great ideas. If there aren't any burning right now, I think we might move on to our next agenda item. But always remember that you can email any of us or reach out. We'll kind of keep this maybe as a standing agenda item to make sure that there's a space for people to bring ideas. So thank you. We want to make sure that this time is useful and helpful and meaningful for people. All right. I think we will now transition to a discussion of the city's plans regarding some of the American Rescue Plan Act funding. And Katie, I think you said there's going to be someone from the mayor's office here. Do you know who I'm passing this over? Is Andrea here? Or
Yes.
Oh, hey, Andrea, there you are. Okay. Sorry, with this new teams, I'm still struggling a little bit.
Totally fine.
I'll pass it over to you. And I think just for reference, we do have one more discussion on our agenda for today. So we'll probably want to keep the conversation on this to about half an hour.
Yeah, well, I think if it's all right for folks, I think I will give kind of a big picture context and how this fits into the sort of larger budget system, and then some details on the housing piece, and then I believe David McGee is going to give us a little bit of a dive into one of the proposals specifically, but I will keep it pretty brief so that we have time for conversation and questions about what you guys are interested in hearing about. So I think, you know, I've mentioned sort of some pieces of this over the last couple months as it's been evolving, but just to give you sort of the context of how we're approaching the ARP funding as well as the 2022 budget this year. So we, as you probably know, we've received or are going to receive $271 million in local aid from the federal government through the American Rescue Plan Act. And that money is separate from the money that we've been talking about with the emergency rental assistance. That's a separate pot of money that's specifically for that use. This is a more general use that was made available to local governments across the country with some general parameters, but a lot more flexibility in terms of what those uses are, in terms of really recovery from the economic and physical recovery from the pandemic. So the way that we've been approaching that is we see this as part of this larger sort of conversation about what are the goals for both the restart of the economy here in Minneapolis as well as rebuilding. We have some opportunities to use, even though this is like COVID related, we have some opportunities in terms of rebuilding from some of the civil unrest that we've experienced in Minneapolis as well. So we're just really trying to look at it from a holistic perspective. So with that in mind, we've also been thinking about the tension between needing to get funds out the door right away, knowing that there's a lot of really immediate emergent needs in community for businesses, for renters, for homeowners, for all of our Minneapolis residents in various ways, and needing to get that money out the door and working as soon as possible. But we also want to make sure that we have community engagement, that we're getting good ideas, that we have this opportunity, that we're getting new ideas and hearing things that are not already part of our pipeline. So that's been part of what we've been trying to balance. So because of that, we've come up with this phased approach. So the first phase is the phase that you might have heard about in the news at the end of last week, which is the mayor's proposals that are out right now. So those initial proposals are close to $90 million of that $271 million bucket. And that phase, as we're sort of terming it, is rescue and restart. So the goals there are focusing on housing instability, small business closures and financial stress that they've experienced, business, nonprofit, and public organizations' capacity and preparation for the lifting of the social distancing measures and the reopening of a lot of our sort of public activities, and then addressing public safety needs as well. So those have been the pieces that we've really been trying to focus on in this first round. So the mayor's office worked really closely with our experts in our departments about what are things you could scale up very quickly, or needs that you've been hearing about in the community that if only we had these resources, we could really quickly get these funds out the door. So that's the context for this sort of first round of proposals. Then And that's happening now. So those came out last Friday. There was a presentation yesterday to the Committee of the Whole City Council talking about some of the details. And when I'm done talking, I can put those links in the chat too, so you guys can circulate that information as well. So the budget office presented that to City Council for them to start taking a look at and having conversation about. Next week on Wednesday evening at 6:05, I believe, is the public hearing where the community will have a chance to weigh in on the proposals as well. Then sorry, I'm pulling up the date so I get it right. So then the following Wednesday, June 23rd, is at the Committee of the Whole, is where council will then amend and mark up this proposal. So you'll notice we're using a similar sort of rhythm and structure as the budget process, just in a much shorter time period for this initial phase. And then the goal is to have that amended proposal passed by the City Council at their July 2nd meeting. So that is a really shortened time frame from what we would usually do with the budget process. And again, the goal is because we know there's emergent needs, we need to get that money out working in community and in our city over the summer so that we can really start to meet some of those emergent needs. And then in the meantime, the budget process is ongoing. So normally, and we are focused internally on this 2022 budget right now as well. So as the normal schedule, the mayor will present his budget proposal for 2022 in August of this year. And then there will be that review period and a series of public comment periods and the council review, which will then be on that normal passage schedule for the end of December. But after the mayor makes his proposal in August, then we will also sort of be pivoting, well, actually probably simultaneously, but we'll be pivoting to then what are the second round proposals for ARP? Because we have the second round of funding available, which we will start to be receiving from the federal government. And with that process, we want to be a lot more intentional about more new public engagement. So a lot of the work that's proposed in the phase one is based on previous public engagement, previous ideas, previous things that have been kind of, we've been marinated on and have been coming together, and now we're in a place where we can really put funding towards making those a reality. So the second phase will include probably more projects like this because we had more in that first round than we could fund. But we really want to make sure there's an opportunity for engagement in that process that is, a longer period of time. So as the information comes out about what that's going to look like and what that schedule is, we'll make sure to share that information with the committee so that you know the opportunities to engage in that second round process as well. And so both of those things will sort of come together at the end of the year, maybe simultaneously, but maybe near each other in terms of approvals for the 2022 budget, as well as the second round of ARP recommendations. So that's sort of the larger context. And I think it's important to put it in that larger context because we've also been thinking about being really strategic about the ARP funds are a really important, unique resource, and we want to make sure we're using them the best we can. We want to make sure we're leveraging other investments and resources from the county and the state as they also have this money. So we want to be able to do some coordination with them as well in terms of what things they're funding, where the gaps are, where we want to make sure in Minneapolis we're addressing some things in a different way or in a deeper way or in a way that isn't being addressed in other places. And then we want to make sure that that makes sense with the budget because we still have, our revenues are still significantly down. So we need to be really strategic about how we're using that money to continue to provide stable city services and the existing programs that we've run for a long time at the city. So we're really seeing that as a holistic way to try to decide which thing goes in which funding bucket to be able to stretch our money the furthest. And that's kind of been our perspective. I guess I'll pause here. Are there any questions on sort of the structure before we talk about more specifically about the housing sort of component of the proposal? Nope. All right. It's just gonna pull up. Sorry, I'm still all this time terrible at sharing my screen, so I'm going to try to do this. All right, is that working? Can you all see that?
Yes.
Awesome. Of the about $90 million is in the round one proposal, just over 28 million of that is for housing and homelessness proposals. So we have 17 different proposals that are out in this round. And so you can see from this pie chart, we've also tried to address various points of the housing continuum through this funding. We've got quite a bit of multiple programs that will be directed towards homelessness response, as well as low barrier housing. We have some significant funding to support the rehabilitation and redevelopment of the MPHA scattered site housing, which they have been getting ready to undertake for some time now. Also funding for supportive housing projects that are really ready to go and needed a little bit more funds to get over the finish line. And funding for Minneapolis Homes, our home ownership program, as well as low-income home repair. So I know that we don't have a whole lot of time, so I'm not going to go through each of these in detail. But this was what I'm showing you here was sent out with the agenda, so you can take a look at these individual proposals. So it's a mix of things: home ownership, renters, homelessness response, a mix of new housing along with preservation. And then, one of the ones that I think we have for a long time had some programs that do low-income home repairs and maintenance. I'll just focus on this one for a minute. But one of the things we know we've experienced with the pandemic is that as people were having to, had reduced income, they were having to not make improvements and maintenance on their homes. So we really wanted to have an opportunity to really ramp up some of those programs. And then you'll see there's homelessness response. There's about $6 million in a variety of homelessness response programs, most of which, might be things that you've heard about that we've been working on for a while. And this is the funding that is able to sort of bring it over the finish line. And then I just wanted to highlight one thing that you might not have seen because it wasn't in that specific housing and homelessness bucket, but as it relates to the next conversation as well, I'm here in the climate and public health section. And you'll notice that here we have included $750,000 towards the initiative that the health department folks will be talking about soon in terms of eliminating childhood lead poisoning. So while that does not show up in the housing work, that is another thing that I think is relevant to this body that people would find interesting. And then the other one in that bucket that is relevant as a crossover is the Green Cost Share program, which is a program that's run again in combination with the health department and with CPED that allows for energy efficiency and renewable energy work, specifically focusing on BIPOC communities and low-income housing. So we are increasing the funding for that, adding another $2 million to that program as well. So I think maybe David, did you want to, whoa, too many things here. Stop sharing my screen. David, did you want to talk specifically about the Build Wealth program that's included? And then maybe we can open it up to specific questions about the process or about the specific proposals. I'm happy to answer the best I can. And maybe Katie and others can jump in as well if there's some things I don't necessarily have the details on.
Yeah, I can give a little preliminary information. We had put in a request. Build Wealth is working on a impact investment strategy to close the disparity gaps. As you know, Minneapolis is in the top 1, 2, or 3 for the worst disparities in homeownership for African Americans and white populations. So we've been working on a strategy called 9,000 Equities, where we found a way. We're going to try to close the gap by 15% over the next 5 to 7 years. And so a number of community partners and fund funders and stakeholders have come together to help us create a loan pool that we can use to kind of help families that have barriers to accessing funding get into home ownership. The goal is to roll the pool up to 100 million, but we're starting out at 10 million, doing a 4-to-1 match, and the city has agreed to put $500,000 into that matching pool that we're going to use to roll the fund. And so it looks like we got about 3 or 4 other partners. The goal is to initially put 2.5 million and leverage that for 10 million and grow that over time. All of that is tied into the long-term education and comprehensive education coaching that's been going on already in our homeownership capacity programming. So $10 million should get 40 to 50 folks, and the goal is to ultimately be doing about 800 to 900 households a year. And there's also an alignment with, there's a Section 8 program that we are aligning this with, that folks who have choice vouchers may be able to participate in this program and use their vouchers in order to purchase a home, which I think is extremely exciting. That's been going on for 20 years, but it hasn't been really been activated or effective here locally. And we're getting ready to reactivate that and put some energy and funding to get some folks on Section 8 to homeowners. I think that's about it.
Great, thanks, David. So I think that one's a good example just of this is work that David and Build Wealth has been doing for a long time, and because of this influx of resource and really trying to focus on what are priorities that we've already set through some of our previous planning at the city, that we can use this money to seed and to leverage bigger impacts throughout the city. So thanks for sharing that.
Thank you. Be sure to thank the mayor for us. I mean, that was I got the phone calls like, whoa, wow. And it's right in time with the impact investing. So we're really trying to take all the money that we're getting and make a huge impact on making this effort work. And a lot of folks are coming to the table, and Wells Fargo of all people, Wells Fargo actually seeded the initiative, believe it or not. Like, I'm almost like, for real, they actually seeded it. And so that's amazing, because they won't be doing the lending. It'll be a community lending program. And so whenever you can have a bank participate to create a loan fund that goes against or could somewhat compete with their lending processes is huge. So.
Thanks so much, Andrea and David, for all of that. I think we'll open it up for questions about the different pieces that we shared, or other questions folks have.
This is Karina. Andrea, can you send me that? Because I'm on the phone, so I can't see what you guys are looking at.
I sure can. I'll send you the full, I just put the full phase 1 proposal in the chat for folks who can see the chat. And then I will also send and I can put that in the chat now too, the housing. So within the full one, you can drill down. For those of you who are data wonky folks, this is very exciting that we have this new-ish budgeting system at the city that our new budget director, Amelia Kruber, has really leaned into. So we have these great pieces that come out of our budget system where you can drill down into the different pieces. So I put the full phase proposal and then also the link to the drill down piece about specifically about the housing and homelessness.
And I would just add the housing and homelessness proposals are linked to the meeting agenda for today as well.
Great, thanks. So other questions, and then I think, of course, as a committee, it's our prerogative to comment on things the city is doing. So if the body wanted, it's something we could consider, whether or not we would want to comment as part of the the public comment period for this first round, or not. Not saying we have to, not saying we don't have to, but it's something that if folks feel strongly about, certainly consider doing. We would just need to, that would be something we would need to decide on at today's meeting.
Andrea, this is Bruce. I just have a quick question. I'm looking under the women's shelter portion, and it looks like you're allocating $2 million, but under that you say funds will be used to acquire a property for the site of a new 30-bed emergency homeless shelter for women who identify as, or people who identify as women. Are you saying you're allocating $2 million for the entire building of it, or just to buy a site?
Katie can probably give the best detail on this one. I see she's getting ready to anyway.
I can comment on that, Bruce. Yes, so it's that money is for acquisition of a building. There is additional, so this is a project that's a partnership between the city and the county. The county board has already committed operating funding. And in fact, there already is this women's shelter open at a temporary location on the St. Joe's campus. But that was always temporary. And the county's been looking for a permanent location. And so so there is the shelter's currently open, and this would be the permanent site for it. And so the money would be, this particular pot of money would be used for the acquisition. And then last year, the city also committed some of the emergency solutions grant dollars it received for the rehab portion of it. And then the county has committed ongoing operating funding for it. So it's a real partnership between the city and county. And to Andrea's earlier point, this was something that has been identified as a need in our homelessness response system. A couple of years ago, the county did an extensive community engagement process where this was one of the biggest priorities that was identified. And so this federal funding has given us an opportunity to deliver on something that has been identified by community as a need in our system. So right now it exists at a temporary location, and this would allow us to acquire a property for a permanent location.
My only comment was it doesn't seem like enough money. It's definitely needed. So.
Yeah, so that is purely for the acquisition costs.
Okay.
Other questions or comments?
So I did just add some of those links in the chat, and I will soon thereafter send them to you, Greener. So the full phase 1 proposal, the housing and homelessness specific proposals, and then, as I mentioned earlier, the presentation that yesterday was given to the city council by the budget director on the proposal, so you can see the conversation that they had. And then I'm also going to put this language that I mentioned this verbally, but I'm putting this in the chat, which is the timing of those other pieces, so that you can see if you wanted to participate in any of those other opportunities for feedback.
Thanks, Andrew.
And I know it's a lot to digest, so feel free if you have questions as you're taking a look at it, want to reach out to Katie or myself, and we can provide you some additional information or answer questions about any of the specific proposals outside of this meeting as well. Happy to do that.
Great. I'm not seeing anybody with their hand up or any other comments. Just one final call. Does anyone else have anything else they want to add on this? All right. Well, thanks again, Andrea, for presenting and sharing, who folks can reach out to. And thanks, David, for sharing about the pieces that you're involved with too. That's some really exciting stuff that hopefully we'll be able to move forward here soon, thanks to this funding. Okay, I think we have arrived at our final agenda item. And Lisa, I'll turn it over to you to talk about the childhood lead elimination plan.
Now, will people be able to see it if I share my screen?
Those who are joined on a computer or something will be able to. We do have at least one, if not a couple committee members who are just participating through the audio phone. So not everyone, but most of us should. So if you could just kind of describe what we're seeing at least, and then maybe we can circulate this after the
Okay,
meeting.
yeah, well, it was attached to the agenda,
Oh.
so people might have had a
Yes,
chance
I'm
to
on
look
the
at it ahead
phone.
of time.
Yeah, I'm on the phone. It's attached to the agenda, Lisa.
Great.
Okay. So this is our draft of the Eliminating Childhood Lead Poisoning in Minneapolis plan. We were tasked after the meeting with the Public Health Advisory Committee presented to the City Council, and they in turn tasked us with developing this plan on how to eliminate lead poisoning in Minneapolis. And so in writing this plan, we came up with 6 strategies that we think are necessary in order to be comprehensive about addressing the sources of lead and how our children are being poisoned. And so we'll go over these strategies one by one. What is not currently in this plan is after several council members looked at this, they then said, yes, now we want to see the numbers on what it's going to cost. And so we are working on developing the cost and response, and the stimulus money is going to play a big part in that, because what I was looking at before for costs that will take years to address now, or decades to address, now with the potential of the stimulus money that's out there, we can do this in a much shorter period of time than we were looking at. So the first part of the plan here is talking about the conditions currently on the ground. So in the last 5 years, there were 527 children were lead poisoned in Minneapolis. And if you look back a little further in that, there are 3,000 children in Minneapolis schools that were lead poisoned before they enter kindergarten. So what that means is their IQ, they've already been brain damaged, their IQ is going to be lower. And how that translates into behaviors is they're going to have a harder time learning in school. Often these children are diagnosed with having ADHD and other learning disabilities, and they are more likely to be in the BIPOC community, live in rental housing, and come from families with lower income rates. And the lifelong results of this, it has lots of health repercussions for people later in life, and they often have higher, because it affects the part of the brain that does impulse control, they often have higher incarceration and unintended pregnancies. You've heard some of this information before last time we presented. Lead poisoning is 100% preventable. We're good at responding after a child is lead poisoned, but this plan is going to be the model for how we go to prevent that lead poisoning from happening in the first place. So we believe that we can start to do better and prevent that lead poisoning instead of only responding after. So you can see on here, there's 3 photos of graphs that we've developed. So one is a map of the city that shows how much the lead poison is concentrated in North Minneapolis and in South Central Minneapolis. The neighborhood view shows the intensity it is on a block by block level, where whole entire neighborhoods are having lead poisonings on every block. And when you look at the block level, you can see how many children are affected just on one block. When there are several things that you're going to see lead paint in, the absolute, or lead in, and how children are exposed. The absolute number one, which is in 99% of our lead poisoning cases, is the lead paint that's on housing. Yes, the lead paint was banned from housing, but it did not remove it from the current housing stock in Minneapolis. And this is this picture here that shows the lead paint in the window trough. So when you open the window, it's usually the lead paint is falling off of the back of the window sash and falling into the window troughs where children are gaining access to it. That is our number one hazard. The other 2 hazards are the windowsill here or porch floors that are often painted with lead paints that are like 40% lead. We find lead in soil because when people were doing maintenance over the years, they just sanded it. and scraped it and let it fall right into the ground. So next to the houses, we often have contamination. We have recently conducted some soil testing across the city. We are not seeing in that first inch of soil very high levels of lead at all. So people would often talk about how much lead and gasoline has contributed, and we're not seeing that in the boulevard soils, but what we're seeing is when we test the soils right next to the houses, that's where we're seeing lead soil hazards that children often get access to. We see some in consumer products. This again is a small percent of where we see children getting lead poisoned. These vinyl dinosaurs, some of these were from my daycare, which I was horrified to find out my children had been playing with dinosaurs that had lead, especially when I saw bite marks on the vinyl. This solution is labeling and education solves for consumer products. There's still products out on the market today that are problematic with their lead content. There's a lot of talk out there about lead in water. We do not see lead in water as an issue in Minneapolis because we've been testing water ever since Flint came out, and we have never found elevated lead levels in the water. But the city of Minneapolis does provide free testing if you do want to check your water, if you're concerned about if you have any leaching from your lead service lines. So the first strategy is to prioritize interdepartmental coordination across the enterprise. So the city touches housing and rental housing in a lot of different ways, and we need to coordinate better in order to talk about lead in a uniform way and the paint hazards. And the first step in doing that is to work with rental housing. So we're currently working to fill a position for a healthy homes coordinator that is going to work to bridge between health and housing inspections for the regulatory side of things with rent licensing, so that we are all working together to target the housing that has hazards and get it corrected. We're using our data to drive our strategies and our research and where we're going to target our resources. We have been piloting for the past several years, coordinating the inspections between health inspectors, which have been focused very intensively on the lead hazards we see in properties, and working with housing inspectors so to find out better how we can work together, how we can both recognize hazards that the other one will see, and to, again, work to get properties into programs that can provide resources to correct these lead hazards. So cross-training and funding that cross-training will be part of our strategies going forward. Also looking at portfolio inspection. So if a property owner has poisoned a child in the past due to negligence in maintaining the lead paint on their properties, it's a good idea not to wait for the next child to live in their other properties, but we should start focusing on inspecting their properties so we can address those hazards before a child's poisoned. The second strategy is to ensure that lead hazards are identified in rental housing. One of the things we often hear from parents or landlords is, I just didn't know. And so we need to stop not knowing. We need to figure out strategies where everybody can know where the lead hazards are in the properties. So one way is to, instead of doing a full lead risk assessment, we know what the most common surfaces are that contain lead in properties and what the most deteriorated surfaces are. And so we can do those inspections faster if we're limiting the surfaces we're looking at. And we kind of call those lead surveys. And we also can target those to the properties most likely, given the age of the housing, which would be pre-1930, and in the specific neighborhoods where we see that the paint is often maintained in poor conditions. We need to increase the communication. So we think that our web pages are not up to snuff and need to be improved. We need to have better communications when we talk about lead hazards with rental property owners and the expectations on how those surfaces are going to be maintained. We need to talk better in our violation text about directing property owners who are having orders written on a paint coated surface, that they are being directed to more efficiently to resources that can actually help them get those surface coatings corrected. We would like to increase the landlord training in our training classes on how to deal with how to maintain lead paint, because it's a lifetime, well, it's an owner, as long as you own that property, that's going to be a condition existing on those properties that need to be addressed. So we want all the landlords or property managers to be educated on how to work with lead and do it safely. It's increasing, beefing up the instructions that we give, communicate to rental property owners about the rental property checklist and how that's going to list what we're looking for when we come out for inspection. A lot of times children are poisoned either through lack of maintenance or incorrect maintenance. So we would like to fund a before you're going to paint, call us. We'll come out, we'll test the surface, we'll tell you whether or not it's lead or not. And then we can provide education at that point on how to work safely with lead. We're going to continue doing free soil screening testing for people. And the Minneapolis Water Department offers free water, that sometime mid-time this year, they're going to be offering free water testing. You can call them up, go online, order a kit, and if you're worried about the water in your house, you can have it tested. Increasing the education again with the property owners by requiring everyone to get the renovation, remodeling, and painting so that they understand if they're doing the maintenance on their property, how it should be done, and when they're hiring people, what they should be looking for in that they're actually getting what they're paying for when somebody has a RRP certificate. And then increasing information that comes across when when permits are being issued on the counter in order to where they're touching surfaces or replacing surfaces, like replacing windows, which is a big one too, that could create a lot of lead hazards in a property if it's not done properly. So in all ways where we touch properties, we want more education and information going out about lead. Improving, our third strategy is improving the existing housing stock by requiring removal or repair of lead-based paint and lead-based paint hazards. So part of it is looking at maybe we have a fine for gross maintenance neglect. Now, when I talk about gross maintenance, I'm not talking about, gee, I painted that property 4 years ago and now the paint's starting to peel off. We often see properties where it is very obvious that surfaces have not been maintained for 20 years. They haven't put a coat of paint on that property. And so that's what I'm talking about, a potential for fines. We don't want the money for this. We want the money for fines like that. And that would only be in a case where a child's been poisoned. We want that money to go towards fixing those repairs. And whether that's where that money should be going to. We want these repairs fixed, whether that's a revolving fund or how that is finally envisioned by the city. I think that's an essential thing. And part of that immediate cleaning. So if we're in properties or housing inspectors are in property and we open the windows and we see those very gross lead hazards, it would be nice to be able to bring what is called a professional lead cleaning, which is a swab term. It's a term from the state language. So to order that a swab cleaning takes place. And then that would remove that hazard. Those swab cleanings are very good at removing those hazards in a temporary manner. Usually we say they last about 3 months until more permanent things can be done in order to eliminate those hazards. We would like when paint starts to alligator, that means it's starting to delaminate from the coating underneath with lead paint. It looks like an alligator skin. It's a very distinctive picture, and we would like to see that reflected more in the tier status to do it higher so that they can be inspected more frequently So we catch it before it starts actually coming off the substrates. We would like to increase the enforcement of intact soils right next to the foundation of rental properties, so that that lead dust and that lead contaminated soil is not accessible to small children who might be playing outside their homes. We're going to continue to enforce our abrasive blasting process, where we're testing homes before people are doing either sandblasting or using water to remove paint from their houses that can put a lot of contaminated dust or paint chips into the air, and it often is, because of the force that it's taking off, it's often leaving the property and going on to pollute other properties and sometimes entire blocks of neighborhoods when it's been done improperly. We want to people want to know whether or not there's lead on the properties. So we're changing how we talk about it on our property information page. There is now a section where it talks if it states whether or not there's been lead has been found at the property, if we know about it, and if those hazards have been corrected. And because it's always a moving point in time, what date that was deemed lead safe or clearance was passed, because as time happens, paint could deteriorate again. So it's just a way to keep everybody to know, oh, I need to think about this one on the property. And it's also important to note that if there is no information there, that's almost scarier than knowing that is scarier there than knowing lead is there, because at least if you know lead is there, you know where the hazard is, instead of with the I don't know if it's there.
Those criteria
Doesn't allow people to,
we know that there's the goals that are listed in the filing that we're going to be focusing on.
Yeah, people need to know what the environmental hazards are in their houses, so the houses can be evaluated in an apples to apples manner. Federal disclosure of lead paint, if you know lead paint's in your property, is already required by federal law, but we think we could do a better job and assist rental property owners in developing a way to tell their tenants about exactly where those surfaces are, so that if they start to deteriorate, the tenants can alert the landlord so that something can have a quick coat of paint put on it before it deteriorates further and a child becomes poisoned. We could require property owners to have risk assessments and clearance reports to be placed, if they have one done on their property, to give copies of that information to the city so that we can keep it associated with the property records, so that when city inspectors go out on site, we can be checking these surfaces to make sure they're maintained. And then it keeps that open channel of when properties change hand, knowing about lead hazards. So during the last foreclosure crisis, there were a lot of properties we knew that had lead hazards, but that chain was broken because they went into foreclosure. Those documents didn't get passed on, and now people were allowed to say, I don't know if there's lead on this property or not. So by having the city functioning as a repository for that information, we keep that education chain going. And number 4, this is where the stimulus money would come into play, is expand resources and opportunities for residential property owners to mitigate lead-based paint and lead-based paint hazards. And so the city currently goes after grants. We've been successful at getting the lead hazard control grants, and we're going to continue to apply for those to bring resources in. We'd like to see a revolving loan fund established for property owners to either pay for the cost of doing a swap cost to eliminate hazards in a very quick manner, or to fund more complete lead hazard reduction projects. Lead service line replacements, there might be some federal funding come for this, but also being able, when a lead service line starts leaking, that is the one way where water could potentially lead to lead poisoning. Again, we haven't seen it yet, but it could happen. So when those lead service lines start leaking, the owners are required to replace it. And I think there is a process now that that can be put on your county taxes and assessed, so that can be paid off over time, because those can be quite expensive repairs. We would like to expand the assessment process. The assessment process with the county taxes to allow more projects to go forward, to pay for lead hazard reduction, so that it doesn't all have to be paid for in 1 year, that it could be paid for over multiple years in order to make these projects more affordable. Again, when a child is lead poisoned, the city is currently paying for someone to come out and do that professional lead cleaning. We are not allowed to, as a city, to recover those costs. But I think doing the funding a mechanism in order to have somebody come out and do that in houses where the housing inspectors have identified lead hazards would be a very good use of our money, and would be included in some of the stimulus money that we're talking about spending in order to get those hazards and prevent a child from being poisoned. The another strategy is to engage with community-based partners and promote lead education and awareness. So one thing we hear often from parents who have had children lead poisoned is they really could use help in navigating the school and the behavioral challenges that their children who are lead poisoned can have. And we think that would help a strategy, and that would also help in educating parents, because there's nobody better at educating a parent than another parent about a hazard that might exist out there, so that it doesn't happen to other children. We would like to see the city sponsor education workshops, both for the tenant advocates, so that they're aware of the lead hazards, and can bring these hazards to our attention, or to encourage their tenants to contact 311 so we can come out and inspect those houses. And we would like to continue to work with this school. So currently we work with the Guys and Gems in Minneapolis schools to provide a week-long module for their summer school to talk about lead and lead hazards. And we think that helps people understand how lead just isn't a hazard today. This is one of those legacy pollutants that unless we do something about it, it's going to poison the next generation. We would like to fund more, let's say, work practices for homeowners, because it isn't just rental property owners where children get lead poisoned, and a lot of people are willing to do the right thing. Sometimes these classes cost, I think it's like $300 to $700 for these classes. So we think funding those classes would also be a good idea. And then using social media and outreach to talk about how to make, when you're doing paint maintenance, to make sure that you're working with it safely, and how to recognize lead or lead hazards, and target spring. 30 days after everybody starts opening their windows in the spring, we start seeing an increase in the number of children who are lead poisoned. There's a direct correlation in our city, and in other cities we've talked to, that correlation exists. Because it's the back of those window sashes. And we need to do a better job of reaching out to new parents so that they're aware of this hazard, because it's so crucial when those children are young and those brains are first developing, and children are shoving everything they can into their mouth because they're toddlers. And just to let people know that faucet fixtures also there needs to be education on that, because lead is often in our plumbing fixtures. Even today in faucets you can buy right off the shelf. There's a certain amount of lead that is allowed. So encouraging people just to run the water until it gets cold, so they can flush out what might have been in contact with that pipe. And the last strategy is to reduce the amount of lead-containing consumer products from retail locations. So there are certain items, like this pictured here is lead-glazed pottery, that are still sold on stores. And we need to work with, coordinate again across city departments with people who inspect these, because the the Lead and Healthy Homes unit is not inspecting retail stores that sell these things. So we need to work together with business licensing or food, lodging, and pool that might be inspecting these stores, so they know what products to look for, and make sure that that lead glazed pottery that is clearly labeled glazed with lead, do not use for food, is not being sold in the section of the store for cooking utensils. So that's a simple way, and we've seen some stores that repeatedly do this, and so we would like to have an ordinance that would help stop that. And of course, when we write ordinances like this, first we're going to do education before we take enforcement action. And then there's just a half a dozen other products that we know contain lead out there. They're legal products to sell, but we would like to see them not stored at and spilled at the level where a child can touch them that might come into the store, and that they're clearly labeled so that consumers can make informed choices. And so if we do all these strategies and implement them, I think that we can actually eliminate lead poisoning in Minneapolis. And I would love to entertain any questions that you might have about this process, or how we might move forward on this.
Thank you so much, Lisa. That's a ton of information and really, really helpful. I know in my work, we see lead hazards affecting families that we are serving on a regular basis. So it's exciting to be moving to a more proactive kind of style of eliminating the hazard, rather than relying on getting our kids sick and exposing them to hazards. So thank you. Can you just quickly, before we move to other questions, what are sort of the next steps for this report? And are there any specific ways that you think our committee could be helpful?
The next steps for this report is I'm developing the financial information about what different elements of these strategies would cost the city, and so that we can use that in developing planning going forward. The support would be in like supporting the current information that was shared for that $750,000 ask that's currently in the stimulus, but that's not going to solve this issue. That's setting us up to build the mechanisms and engines for further asks later for additional funds to actually go in and do many more of the rehabs that need to happen. And so that would be reaching out to rental property owners, and having windows replaced and those porch floors addressed that are poisoning our children, and having the resources that are currently being offered with this money are more than I could have ever dreamed for. This is exactly what the level of funding that we need if we really want to change this. Or otherwise, this problem is just, if we don't get this problem out of our housing when we have the resources, it's just going to continue to poison children again and again and again. And when you think that most of these are properties built in the 1930s that are causing these poisonings, think, that's a century. That's almost a century we've been poisoning their children this way. Let's stop and do something better.
Great, thanks. Thank you so much. What questions and comments do folks have? We do have some time to discuss this. I know we've brought up lead briefly before in our committee, but opening the floor to questions and comments. One question I have, Lisa, too, is for kind of data purposes. I know during 2020 and perhaps well into 2021, there's people weren't going to the doctor to get those 1-year checks as much, and maybe not getting, maybe the number, I think the numbers of blood lead level testing were down. Do you see that decrease in testing numbers from 2020? Is that causing any issues or impacting this project?
It's not impacting this project, but what we did see, because this is gearing towards prevention. So what we did see in 2020 is in the summer, we usually have many more lead poisonings being reported. We had way fewer lead poisonings being reported because children weren't going to the doctors. And then at the very end of the year, all of a sudden people were going to the doctor, where we usually saw a reduction, we saw an increase. And we also saw children, we had more higher level lead poisonings, whereas before we might have had a level of 10 or 7 in their blood. We were seeing more above 20 because they had gone longer with exposure, because it's a cumulative exposure over time. And we continue to see now in 2021, we are continuing to see lead poison. Usually it goes down a little bit every year, and now it's increasing from what it was last year, definitely. One of the exciting things I also see with getting money from potential money from the stimulus funding to address these lead hazards is there was also funding that was put in those budget asks to do weatherization and energy efficiency. And so when we combine those projects with the lead projects, we have done substantial improvement to our current housing stock, which helps to keep it affordable. It removes environmental hazards, and it makes it cheaper for the families to live in those houses and operate them, because their energy costs will be going down. And so this is kind of a unique time to really change our the Minneapolis housing stock. And we are talking about these funds going out as grants to get this work done. So there's, to me, there are no excuses to not proceed with this work. There might be challenges, but if we are approaching the homeowners and the landlords with resources in hand to correct the housing stock and improve it, I hope that we can really change things going forward.
Other committee members have thoughts or questions for Lisa?
I do. I'm sorry. My son was shutting his Zooming down. He's done for the day. I do. So where I stay, there was 2 residents who had lead, and they were kind of scared to talk to management about it. So I never heard anything else about it. I know her son is very small because it affects his growth for his age, and she won't talk about it. But to add to it, I know me and Kelly was talking about some things in the past about the tier program, and especially if a property is a 3-tier program, that we can implement, those same strategies by saying, okay, this property is, problematic. They're 3-tier. They got to have these issues. And then if it's one of those buildings like a public housing building or subsidized building, I still think that the health department should ride along with these inspections, because then they can be able to capture it in real time, so that it won't go and say, hey, I didn't know, I wasn't aware, until somebody get real sick and then there's an issue where it's exposed now. So I still think that the health department should ride along with these inspections that happens in low-income housing, so that we can create healthy homes for the families and the children that live there. So that can roll back down to those tier programs where we can add an addendum to, that whole process. So I think it's a great program. I think it will save lives, and it will definitely make homes healthier, and it'll cause some awareness, because it's a very serious, situation to not know if your house is healthy and not even to know that the soil, is healthy. So I support it because I've been talking about that for a long time. So I do understand, what's going on behind it. So I do support it.
Thank you for those comments. Yeah, we've been piloting for a couple of years, coordinated inspections with housing, and we think that's yielding good results, but there's far fewer health inspectors than there are housing inspectors. And so that's why we're working with, we've just come to the conclusion, and this has shown how much more we need to coordinate together in order to have those dual inspections happening more, or have the housing inspectors be our eyes that say, this property has this hazard, we need to bring health in. So we are working, that's a very good observation, and we're working on making that that handoff more business as usual than just because I worked with this person, I know that this could happen. We want to make that business as usual, that those handoffs happen so we can go in and prevent a lead poisoning.
Okay, yeah, that's great.
To that point on the coordination piece, I know you mentioned that you're still working to fill the shared position, the health and housing inspections shared position. What is the status of that? And I'm sorry if I'm making you repeat that.
No, we are currently working with HR to hire it. We had to write the job description. It was we had to go through the city process. It was lengthy, but we're at the point where we should be posting that position, hopefully, either later this month or next month.
Great.
And what would be the qualifications, Lisa?
They would have to be, we're trying to hire internally from the city. So somebody who is very familiar with rental licensing stock and rental licensing processes. And they, and is also has some knowledge of lead paint and the hazards, so that we can have them. The health department is going to supervise this person, but we're embedding them in housing in order to build that bridge so that we can get more efficient referrals.
Okay. Do you, in the future, would you ever want to create maybe like an apprenticeship or internship so others outside of the city can learn the work, so that we can hire more people and get more people hired within the city to learn this work?
We have had some conversations with HR to create some more entry-level positions that could do on this work, but we currently don't have additional FTE resources. We are going to be to create that lower level position, so we can think about that as we move forward, because I would like to see some positions that require less formal education that we could train up into promotable positions.
Okay, thank you for that.
So it sounds like some of the immediate next steps that folks can take are advocating for the allocation in this first round of the funding allocation. And then as it moves forward, I'm sure, Lisa, you'll bring to us if there are materials that get generated or things that we can all distribute and share to our respective, communities and organizations. That would definitely be something. I think some of the education materials and connection points are really helpful.
Absolutely, because as we, if we are granted that stimulus money that's on the table right now, we are going to need everyone's help to get us into the right properties, because half the problem is getting people to open the doors and say, yes, I will take your money.
Great. Well, thank you so much for sharing all this really helpful information. It's really, really important. I know we're coming to the end of a long meeting on a hot day, but I know we do have a few more minutes. If anyone, whether the city staff or council staff who are on the line, have anything they want to add, or committee members, any announcements you want to share before we adjourn, just open it up.
This is Katie. Just real quick, we'll send more information via email. It is, things are starting to go back to more in-person type meetings and things like that. I don't have direction yet from the clerk's office about when we may return to in-person, but I think we're going to be getting some very soon. So as soon as we have more information about that, we'll certainly, and what that's going to look like moving forward, we'll let everybody know. And I see Robin has his hand up too.
Yeah, go ahead, Robin.
Just wanted to let folks know, I don't think it has been mentioned yet today, that council members Gordon, Bender, and Ellison are introducing an ordinance, right to council ordinance next week. And so that will start moving through the council's process, but just wanted everybody to be aware.
Great, thanks, Robin. And to clarify, that would be for Minneapolis renters facing evictions.
That's right. Yep.
I saw that.
Yep. And
I wanted to share.
What was that question, Karina? Sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. It's like a bad echo going on, but I just wanted to share. I received a resolution from the House. Can you hear me?
Can you say that again?
I was saying I received a resolution from the House for housing rights for tenants.
Okay.
Yeah, so that was like maybe a couple weeks ago. So yeah, I wanted to share that.
Great. Katie, were you gonna share something too?
It's like a delay.
I was just going to say, just following up on Robin's comment about right to counsel, that, yeah, it's being introduced, and there was a presentation by city staff on that last fall that we could share with the committee. And then whenever there's obviously any sort of draft language, we'll bring that through this committee for feedback.
Sounds great. Any other updates or announcements or final thoughts for today? Thanks, everyone. I feel like, oh, go ahead.
No, I just didn't know if you heard me. I don't know if it's a big old delay on my end, so I don't know if y'all can hear anything I'm saying.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I think there is a little delay, but we can hear you. All right, it's almost 5 o'clock. I think we're gonna adjourn for today, and we'll see you all in July. Thanks so much for being here, and take care and stay safe. Bye, everyone.